Did you know that Lady Jane Grey was only 16 when she became Queen of England? Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly and today's episode is all about the three forgotten Tudor rulers of England between Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. That is, Edward VI, Lady Jane Grey and Mary I of England. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out at worldhistory.org/Patreon or via the Patreon link down below. The Tudor dynasty began with the first Tudor king, Henry VII, who became King of England after defeating and killing his predecessor, the Yorkist king Richard III, at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. Henry VII had a relatively peaceful and prosperous reign, coming off the back of 4 decades of skirmishes and unrest during the Wars of the Roses. After his death in April of 1509, his son Henry VIII succeeded him as King of England, a monarch best known for his 6 wives that are remembered with the rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. When Henry VII, the second Tudor king, died in 1547, he left 3 children behind, all from different mothers. Edward, son of Jane Seymour, Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, and Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn. After the death of Henry, his son, at the age of 9, became the 3rd Tudor king, Edward VI of England. When Edward ascended the throne to become King Edward VI of England, he was only 9 years old, and because of this, England was less ruled by a child and more so ruled by a council of nobles, and chief among these was the king's uncle, Edward Seymour. Seymour was an ambitious man. He gave titles and money to his supporters and had himself promoted to the Duke of Somerset, which essentially made him the sole regent. Edward VI's father had set in motion the English Reformation, establishing the Protestant Church of England with the English monarch at its head, and Seymour was committed to this Reformation. Seymour had an oath included in the coronation ceremony of the king that he would uphold the Reformation, and instituted new acts allowing for free discussion of religious matters. Of course, by being this outwardly supportive of the Reformation, meant he earned himself a fair few Catholic enemies, including his own brother Thomas. Edward Seymour went so far as having his brother executed in order to keep his position and favour with the king and his 2 half-sisters. The Protestant reforms continued to sweep throughout England, with removals of all religious iconography and imagery from churches, the shift to English from Latin in worship services, and the inclusion of a new Book of Common Prayer. With the dissolution of monasteries, the monarch and the nobility of England were lining their pockets with the riches of the former monastic orders and their lands. Of course, with major religious shifts such as these, rebellions were sure to follow, and some of the hardline traditionalists took a stand against the changes. The uprisings weren't only fueled by the religious reforms though, but also by land enclosures, inflation, and new taxes, not to mention the pressure of the rising population in England, which had increased from 2.3 million to 3 million in just 20 years. Eventually, the riots and rebellions were put down, but they were enough trouble that Edward Seymour was removed and John Dudley took his place. Okay, back to Edward VI. As a child, he never really had much of a strong constitution, but despite his health issues, he still learnt Latin and Greek and took classes in philosophy, theology, and the classics. He was educated in physical activities such as fencing, archery, horse riding, and tennis, as well as in the arts, including dancing and music lessons. John Dudley gained the confidence of the young king, and he set about quickly removing any rivals, even Edward Seymour. In King Edward's diary, we have a fairly unemotional and to-the-point account of the death of his uncle, which reads, "The Duke of Somerset had his head cut off on Tower Hill between 8 and 9 o'clock this morning." The Reformation continued, and the king and his regent worked closely together, but in the summer of 1552, Edward contracted both smallpox and the measles. And then, after a harsh winter of 1553, he started showing the symptoms of tuberculosis, to which he succumbed when he was 15 years old. In the event Edward should happen to die with no children, his father had appointed his daughter, with Catherine of Aragon, Mary, as heir to the throne. However, Mary was a staunch Catholic, and Dudley was worried she would reverse the Reformation should she become queen, which just so happened would also put an end to Dudley's career. So, before Edward died, Dudley persuaded him to instead nominate his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as heir. Lady Jane Grey had numerous ties to the throne as great-granddaughter of Henry VII and granddaughter of Mary Tudor, who was the sister of Henry VIII. And she was also the daughter-in-law of John Dudley. At the age of just 16, Lady Jane Grey became Queen of England. And she was just as surprised as anyone else when she was told that she was going to be queen, and didn't even find out until after Edward had died. She protested that perhaps she wasn't the right woman for the job, but on July 10 of 1553, she was declared queen anyway. Despite the nomination going through, Dudley's carefully laid plans weren't meant to be, since the choice in succession between a distant royal relative and a daughter of Henry VIII wasn't a tricky decision at all. Plus, Mary wasn't going to let her chance to be queen slip away. Mary gathered her supporters and their armies and marched on London. People thought that the wishes of Henry VIII should be honoured, and after just 9 days as queen, Lady Jane Grey ceased to be the reigning monarch of England when Mary declared herself queen on July 19th. Mary was supported by cheering crowds in London, and when she met Lady Jane Grey, who was a reluctant participant in the entire ordeal, Jane told Mary that she was perfectly happy to return to her normal life. Mary instead had Jane and her husband imprisoned in the Tower of London. After Jane Grey was confined to the Tower of London, many of the Protestant reformists who had supported her swung back to Catholicism in favour of Mary and royal legitimacy. The Tower of London did not have purpose-built cells for prisoners at this time, but instead Jane spent 6 months in her apartments with 4 regular attendants. She had access to books and could stroll the tower's gardens. She was separated from her husband during this time, but may have been in contact with him via letters, and we know she was in contact with other prisoners by letters she had concealed in a prayer book. Despite Jane not being an active participant in all of the scheming, and how she even wrote a letter to Mary saying she accepted blame but meant no harm, Mary still signed Jane's death warrant. At this time, any woman convicted of treason was to be burnt at the stake, but Mary changed the policy in a document which still survives today, ordering Jane to be beheaded instead. In an effort to save Jane's soul, Mary allowed a 3-day grace period before the execution for Jane to renounce her Protestantism, but receiving a definitive no in response, ordered it to proceed. Jane was offered the chance to see her husband one final time, to which she replied that they would meet shortly elsewhere. Soon after, Jane and her husband were both beheaded within the walls of the tower. Jane put the blindfold on herself, and then, after struggling a little to find the block on which to lay her head, she said her last words, quoting scripture, "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit." She was 16 or 17 years old. On October 1st, 1553, Mary became Queen Mary I of England. She was the popular people's choice for queen and used her time as monarch to undo the Reformation process instigated by her father and continued by her half-brother. But interestingly enough, given her initial popular support, her efforts earned her the nickname Bloody Mary. Mary was determined to return England to Catholicism, and so she reversed numerous acts that were initiated under her father, including the Act of Supremacy, which put the English monarch at the head of the church instead of the Pope. She also handed estates back to the church that had been confiscated, which was not a popular decision in the eyes of the nobility. Beyond this, she also sought to unite England with Catholic Spain, which was definitely not a popular move with the people. She aimed to do this by marrying Philip of Spain, the son of King Charles V of Spain, and enemy number one of England. Spain was growing richer and more powerful as it plundered the New World, and people were starting to remember that Mary's mother was the daughter of King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile, who had funded Columbus's 1492 expedition and initiated contact with the Americas, enriching Spain considerably. In response to this Spanish marriage idea, a rebel army led by Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger, son of the famous poet of the same name, in what came to be known as Wyatt's Rebellion, marched on London, perhaps with the hope of placing Mary's half-sister, the Protestant Elizabeth, on the throne. The cause of the rebellion went beyond Wyatt and his supporters objecting to England becoming united with Spain, as the poor state of the country's economy and the desire to return England to Protestantism spurred the movement on as well. The threat posed by Wyatt's rebels was so serious that Mary ordered the destruction of the bridges across the River Thames. So Wyatt swam across the river and started to repair one of the bridges. He had lost the element of surprise, however, and outnumbered and outgunned, had no choice but to surrender to Mary's troops. Wyatt and many of his supporters were then executed. Despite no one being too keen on the idea of Mary marrying a Spanish monarch, she eventually gained permission and married Philip on July 25, 1554, although he had no more power than a consort. Philip was 11 years younger than Mary, and their marriage was definitely not a happy one. Although Mary seems to have been genuinely fond of her husband, Philip, only a pawn in his father's foreign policy, did not return her affections and sought out younger, better-looking ladies. The fact that the couple were often not in the same country placed additional strain on the marriage. Mary continued to undo the Reformation work of her father and brother, and eventually stepped up her persecution of Protestants. From February of 1555, she began burning people at the stake. Over 4 years, she burnt 287 Protestant men and women. It was due to these public executions that she became known as Bloody Mary. Her reign was tumultuous, to put it mildly, but her less than stellar reputation comes from Protestant writers of the time who vilified her, and after Elizabeth I returned the country to Protestantism, these works became the official history. Mary's reign took a significant toll on her, as she had to deal with numerous threats and rebellions, a failing economy, religious and political polarization, antagonism directed toward her as the first female monarch of England, as Jane Grey had become discounted as illegitimate, and an unhappy marriage. At 42 years of age, Mary died of stomach cancer, and with no heirs to succeed her, the Protestant Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth I of England, and her reign initiated one of the greatest periods of England's long history. What do you think of the reign of Mary I? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our new uploads. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. If you like my sweater, you can find this design and a bunch more in our shop at worldhistory.store, or you can find a link for it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon with another video.